We'll call the meeting to order of the Legislative Committee of the Dunn County Board of Supervisors on this Wednesday, March 12th, 2025, 3 o'clock in room 60 of the Dunn County Government Center. First order of business is call of the roll. And as I purview the attendance, the only one not here is Supervisor Quinn. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes from October 9th, 2024. You've all had a chance to read them, I hope. What is your pleasure?
Second.
We have a motion by Supervisor Morehouse and a second by Supervisor Headland. Any questions, corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Public comments. I do not think we have the public here, but we do have a comment. Yes, please. You can go up to the podium, or do you have a mic? Okay.
There was one public comment submitted online yesterday. It was also forwarded to all of your emails. It came in yesterday at 2:18 p.m. Public comments for the Legislative Committee. After watching the WC Legislative Conference in Madison in February, and assuming Dunn County was well represented at the conference, I must ask what happened to the Dunn County resolution pertaining to the funding of the technical college system related to taxation of local property taxpayers. It's time to be crystal clear relating to the oaths of office elected officials take when they are sworn into office. Dunn County has guiding documents relating to how the county will serve its constituents. Upholding the United States Constitution and the Wisconsin's Constitution is clearly stated in the oath of office by elected officials. It is clearly time to get down to basic civic education. The quote, rigor, end quote, of the oath of office basically depends on each board of supervisor. Wisconsin's Constitution is not partisan. Maybe county legal should weigh in on what the Wisconsin Constitution says relating to public education in this state. For over 2 decades, I've stated that the pursuit of all public higher education is completely an individual choice. The Legislative Reference Bureau will support my statement and has over the 2 decades. Should Dunn County verify my statement, or should each board of supervisor double check my statement? My demographics, retired senior living on a fixed income and trying to stay in our homes we worked so hard for during the working lives, has dealt with an unfair taxation for 50 years, which today is now punitive in nature because the public higher education in this state is an individual choice, not mandatory. Should Dunn County look at its own documentation related to the ethical and moral responsibilities this county has related to its residents it serves? Question mark. Terry Nichols, Town of Colfax.
Thank you, Andrew, and we'd like to thank Mr. Nichols for his comments. I guess I'd have a question for our county board chair. Would an explanation of where it sits be in order now?
I think it would be outside the agenda,
Okay.
but we could certainly see about maybe getting an email
Yeah, all right.
out.
We'll do that. We'll email the whereabouts of that resolution and where it stands. And we'll get that out to Mr. Nichols. Thank you, Terry. Next order of business is consider reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the Legislative Committee, resolution supporting county courts. Do I have to read the whole thing?
Or you can just ask if anyone has questions.
You have the resolution before you. Does anyone have any questions or need clarification on what it says or proposes to do? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion and a second to go ahead with this.
I move to approve the resolution as it stands before us.
Supervisor McCullough moves. Is there a second? Supervisor Morehouse seconds. Now we have discussion. Speaking to the resolution I would call on Luke Wilsey.
Thank you. So basically, Katie had told us that she would like, with all the interpreters that they're going through, they're asking for more money from the state and that they wanted us to send this letter, and I approve of it, so.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? I know that this was an item on the WCA discussion the other day, if I might, or am I digressing here?
No, you're well within.
Yeah.
I know that the WCA prioritizes which of its resolutions it pushes hardest on, and the court funding is the next big push. The last one, of course, was the shared revenue.
So it's on the radar, one of the legislative goals of the WCA. So I guess, unless there's some more questions or some more discussion, I would, we would be ready to vote on this resolution. Does everybody understand? Having said that, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Because of your extreme swiftness, that concludes our business for today for the legislative meeting. I adjourn the meeting.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Dunn County Executive Committee to order. Call the roll. Everybody's here. Approval of the minutes.
So move.
Supervisor Steen moves. Supervisor Bauer seconds. Any speaking to the minutes? Hey, John Calabrese is in here. No one's going to correct our typos. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Minutes are approved. Public comments. I'm not aware of any. Okay. County managers report. Chris.
All right, you have a copy of the draft county board agenda. The only change would be that I'm aware of is that there are no purchase orders over $40,000 this month. So I took that item off and have replaced it with I'll do a quick update about the Muddy Creek Solar Project. We were notified last week or this week, I don't know, because time goes by so fast, that there's another large solar installation that has submitted their paperwork to the Public Service Commission. It essentially wraps around the Elk Creek Solar Project, but it's about twice as big. So it's about 3,700 acres. And it's so the paperwork's already been submitted to the PSC. That process, if you recall from Elk Creek, takes about a year. And I think they submitted it in December. So Rachel Wells from Land Information is working on a map for us for next week, so you can kind of see where that sits and where it is. But essentially, if you think about Elk Creek here and kind of wrapping around it, that's kind of what it looks like. So, and I think as that relates to the board agenda, that's all that there is. Any questions about that? Okay, ERP procurement update. I gave you a handout in your folders, in your whatever packets, with I don't know where I went with it. Well, I had it up, but anyway, with a breakout of where we have landed with our ERP project. So as you'll recall, we've been in the planning process for now two full years. And we're into our third year. We have finalized bids, finalized contracts with the two vendors. Sorry, got momentarily BS&A as the ERP side and Tyler Technology as the sorry, it's not Tyler Technologies, that's the other project. How about Andrews Technologies as the timekeeping side? So we had budgeted $500,000 this year to purchase those systems. And so I gave you a breakout of where that all landed. And it looks like we'll spend about 365,000 of that for those two systems. So there will be, we will not have covered all of what we budgeted for those purchases. And then I gave you the year by year breakout. Following that, it'll cost us about average, probably whatever that looks like, $125,000-ish a year for years 2, 3, 4, and 5. And right now our SAP contract is, I believe it's at the bottom of that page, but I think it's 232. 223. I got my 2s and my 3s, but not enough. So, yeah, 223,000. So we will save, once we're fully implemented with those. Beyond the actual physical dollar savings, the amount of time that we will save has to be improved. So particularly on the timekeeping side of it, I think that it will be very exciting. So we are currently negotiating with SAP to see if we can go in earlier on the timekeeping system, and would do that yet this fall if we can work out the details with SAP and the vendor. And it takes about 10 months of implementation on the other side. So it'll be roughly probably very beginning of second quarter of 2026.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just curious, Chris, on this breakout of cost on the BS&A. What constitutes 100% implementation success rate?
That is that the, oh, let me see what I check.
I'm sorry if it's
Oh,
too
sorry.
complicated.
Yeah, no. I just want to say, I want to make sure I was speaking correctly. They essentially have, of all of the people that they have sold their product to, they've been able to get it up and running and the project hasn't failed in implementation, which isn't terribly unusual I mean, it's not unusual in an ERP implementation that the project will fail.
Got it. Thank you.
Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you, Chris and Mr. Chair. Does NeoGov fit in here too, or are we using them? Next-
We are, and we will continue to use them in some capacity of what we currently use them for. We use them currently for recruitment and onboarding. And we're currently working through whether we continue to use them for performance evaluation. But those are already things we're buying from them, so they didn't need to be a part of the ERP. And that contract is roughly 60-ish thousand. Jenna's talking to Dustin, but I think it's about 60,000 a year.
Supervisor Headland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a question, maybe this would be for finance. Any idea up to date what we have spent on our procurement process? Maybe Beata can.
I'll do my best to answer your question. When you say procurement process, staff-wise,
Just, I know, yeah, staff, I know they added.
Sure.
Extra pay and extra people.
Yep. So when we put the estimated cost for, let's say, 2024, we were slightly over budget. Overall, we budgeted about 200,000 in wages and about 50 in operating costs. Anything that would cost to facilitate the meetings, trainings, travel, and stuff like that. And then we actually were just shy over budget on that. And I believe that one was 20,000 over budget. 29, thank you. Now for 20, this year, 25, we budgeted roughly about 700,000, just a shy over. As Chris said, 500 of that was for the software itself, and the rest, which is approximately 208,000 in wages. So far, I don't have projected numbers because we only have 2 months in. But right now, we are about $30,000 for January and February in wages. And we have about $56,000 of operating expense as of through January and February.
So this process will be much more efficient than paying $1 million to get out of what we shouldn't have got into.
That is the ultimate goal, to have a system that would reduce redundancies, reduce or completely eliminate silos, have a more of a centralized way of collecting data. So you entered it in one spot and you share amongst others instead of taking it here, entering it here. And then so like, for example, we provide these awesome financial reports for you and the standing committees. Those are manually done. I get the data out of the system, but there's a lot of touching human intervention to get those reports out. So we're hopeful that we'll have a system that will write these reports and we can automate them and we can set up a timer that says on this day, generate a report, and better yet, email it to so-and-so. So there is technology out there. We're really hoping, as this was just an example of one way to create those efficiencies. And also this would give us an opportunity to look how we do tasks. Because sometimes automation might take away a task, but then you can use those individuals to repurpose their skill set in other areas that's much needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Steen.
Yes, the money that we save then, does that go back in the general fund? Or is it kept in this silo, so to speak, to cover any unexpected expense?
It will go back to the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
It's actually ARPA interest money, right?
Yes,
so.
but
Yeah,
it
with
stays in the
ARPA
general
interest
fund.
and it's, yeah.
I don't see any more questions. Thanks, Beata.
All right, so kudos to Tiffany Taggart and KT Gallagher, who've led that project wonderfully and been kept us very close to on our timeline, which was aggressive to begin with. Supervisor Kinnear has been a part of our oversight committee and has seen our lengthy discussions about nothing. No, that's not true. Probably just feels like that to him. No, has been a part of those conversations just so that you had sort of eyes and ears to the process. And then lastly, there was a request in the committee on administration for a contingency request to the Colfax Library, which was granted. It was a relatively small amount of money, $5,000, but it lent itself to the question of how library funding works. And Andrew has put together a presentation as a reminder about kind of review of how library funding works.
So as Chris mentioned, there was a request from the Colfax Library. They ended up, because of the calculations from last year, about, well, $17,000 short. And they figured out $12,000 of funding to make up for it. And the Committee on Administration CRNT and then Committee on Administration ultimately ended up approving the $5,000 contingency request to kind of make the Colfax Library whole. And so the presentation I've got talks a little bit briefly about how library funding works and how we kind of run on a 3-year cycle and what that means for libraries. Because it is confusing that actually in 2025, we're paying out the amounts for the library's usage in 2023, because we kind of run a year cycle. So as we get that up, the reason that we do that is because we have to close out a year. So we have to close out 2023, and then the libraries have to submit their information on the usage in the spring of 2024. And then that information goes to the CRNT committee to figure out funding. based on a formula that we'll talk about in a second. And then when that gets adopted by the budget at the end of 2024, we pay out the libraries in 25. That makes sense? So we have to kind of like, everything that we're doing is kind of in a 3-year cycle, 2 years behind, but with libraries. And so here we go. So we kind of, if you see over here on the left-hand side, IFLIS, which used to stand for the Indian Head Federated Library System, now it's just called IFLIS, is that multi-county library system in western Wisconsin that we're part of. And you can see all the different library districts that they're kind of are separated into services. There's 381 libraries. But what that means in the state of Wisconsin is that any Dunn County resident that uses a library from any of these systems in any of their counties can actually ask for reimbursement from the home county from which they live in. So in any given year, even though we have technically four libraries in Dunn County, we really are getting requests from all different libraries across the entire state of Wisconsin, especially with different ways in which that they can request information and get that out in a speedy manner. We're actually seeing quite a bit of influx in counties that we've never seen make requests from Dunn County residents before. Brown County, Sheboygan County, things like that. Most of the requests come from that IFLIS area, but again, it can come from any county in the state of Wisconsin. And they all track it. So when you get your library card, it's associated with the county that you live in. And so when you check out a material, it will then say, oh yeah, you were a Dunn County resident, you checked out these 15 books that we had to provide to you. And so it's a chargeback system for the libraries. It's all done by state statutes, and a resident of any county can request materials from any other county. So that's that. The next one will show a little bit about how the usage in Dunn County libraries, right? So here we've got the four kind of standard county libraries. Menominee also has an extension library in the village of Elkbound. So, but the four main libraries that we have, Menominee, Colfax, Boyceville, and Sand Creek. On the left, you can see the total usage, right? So this is in the data from 2023 that we paid out in 25. So the orange is the total usage, and then it's broken down. Green is in county. See how I stayed on brand there? Dan, Chris, you're welcome. And then the out of county usage, you can see there in that kind of burgundy color on the far right. So you can see Menominee, actually the Menominee Public Library had more out of county users than in county users. Isn't that interesting? A similar situation in Sand Creek, though smaller numbers, but based on their area, right? That makes a lot of sense when we have Barron, Chippewa County residents using the Sand Creek Library. And then, of course, Colfax and Boyceville is the opposite. They're a little bit more insulated inside the county, but it's just interesting the way that that's how the library usage works. So how does this work and who pays, right? So the city of Menominee has a library. And so the city of Menominee, or any municipality that hosts a library, that has a library in their municipality, they don't have to pay additional library taxes, right? Because they already have a library. So we don't want the citizens of that municipality to get hit twice, because all Dunn County residents are paying into the library system, right? So if you're hosting a library, you don't want to get hit with your additional municipal taxes, right? So any municipality that hosts a library can opt out of having to pay into the library system. So City of Menominee has a library, they don't pay additional taxes in. Town of Colfax, Village of Knapp, they have county portioned taxes for library. You okay? Okay. And that's because each of those municipalities already hosts, that host the library provides funding for them. So it's a way that the taxpayers of those municipalities don't get kind of double taxed for that kind of a thing. In the next part, you're going to see, this is a lot of state statutes, right? But Wisconsin state statutes, chapter 43 talks all about libraries. It's exciting reading if you're looking for something at 3 a.m. To review, but it essentially says that all libraries have to receive a minimum of 70% reimbursement for their usage. So a Dunn County resident checked out 15 books from Chippewa. We have to pay that 70% of those 15 book usage out of Chippewa. That's a minimum. The CRT committee has historically, for a long time, always said that any out-of-county libraries will fund at that minimum 70%, and that any in-county libraries, our 4 main libraries, have been provided 100% of funding. That's to make sure that they can be a vibrant entity that helps a majority of our community. And then, of course, it talks about the county board is the one that provides the funding for those public libraries. And that's why we levy a tax for them to make sure that can get completed. So then from there, we kind of talk a little bit about, on the next slide, we talk a little bit about the 3-year cycle, right? So here's where we had 2023, the report gets made in 24 and we pay it out in 2025. So we're kind of always running in that 2 years behind, but it's like really a 3-year cycle. You can kind of see how that gets done. So what the result of that was, if you want to go to the next one, is this is our very complicated spreadsheet that we have. On the top, there's always the out-of-county libraries, and the bottom, there's always the in-county libraries. And so you can see here, we say, so for example, Turtle Lake Library, right, in Barron County, we have their reported operating budget, the total circulation, right? So this number divided by this number equals the cost of circulation, right? Times the number of Dunn County residents that used it equals the different funding structures. So CR&T always looks at the spreadsheet every year and says, how is this going to fund it? How is this going to be funded? And since they've usually done 70% of out of county and 100% of in county, we usually break that down. What happened was, and so this was the total amount, $799,000 that was paid out in January of 2025 for that 2023 reporting year. So it always kind of runs backwards that way. What we saw in 2023 was actually that the total funding based on the cost per circulation and Dunn County resident usage for Colfax and actually the City of Menominee Library both went down. Part of that is just because of the circumstances surrounding how many people were using and what the total operating budget was. So it fluctuates each year. What we learned though from this last year was that it's going to be really helpful for the CR&T committee to put together about a 3-year or 4-year cycle to look at funding. So we would have known that Colfax and Menominee took a dip in funding, and we could have maybe done something about it a little bit earlier than waiting until the following year when it's getting paid out. So we're learning. It's exciting. I bet there's a library book about that. If you go to the next one, Dan. And then, right, here's my apportionment thing that it's very, very magical. I'm one of 7 county clerks that apportions taxes, and we could certainly change that at any point in time if we want to. But you can see always over here, here's that $799,000 of library funding. And so of all the different 30 municipalities in Dunn County, we don't apportion taxes for those 4 that host a library, right? So we don't want them to get hit twice. So essentially, this $799,000 is being apportioned across the 30 municipalities, and based on their population and many different fun, exciting Excel formulas that Piata is very good at, we get these calculations to make sure that we're apportioning the right amount of taxes for each entity and municipality in the city or in the county. And so that's neat. If you've ever got questions about it or want to look at the formulas, Piata is happy to talk to you about that. Or I would be as well. And then, of course, I had to finish with a Cronkite quote because I think it's important. That's a quick and overview of how library funding works. It's not very straightforward and it is confusing. So if you've got questions, I'd be happy to answer them as best I can. But.
Supervisor Hedlund.
Not a question, a comment, and I brought this up at our library planning meetings. To give you and people just a comparison. In the state of Minnesota, which has a lot of fine libraries, but if you live in a small town like my son and daughter and their kids live, which is very close to Winona, they can't go to Winona and get a book because the city of Winona will not give them a library card, and they can't use their local library card to do so. If they lived here in Wisconsin, they could go anywhere in Wisconsin and get their kids books. If they're on vacation, it's a rainy day and they want to go to a local library and get them a book, they could. Minnesota, you can't. So I think we got a great system, very complicated, and I'm hope you can figure out something.
Yeah, so not only better at football, but better at libraries as well, Wisconsin versus Minnesota. Good to know. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank
Does
you.
not look like it. All right. Supervisor Steen.
Andrew. Now, I'm sure that the executive committee got educated, and if you're gonna present this to the whole board, that would educate the whole board. Would you be willing to come to some villages and explain this? Because I'll guarantee you that very few of the village people would understand the complexities here and why is this and why is that. They just look at the bottom line, so.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank
Now that I
you.
know that Minnesota doesn't do it,
Yeah, all
as
right.
well as Wisconsin.
Thank you.
All right. So next up, items placed at the request of the chair. This one's going to be a little bit complex to get through, so we're going to do it in 3 bites. We're not approving anything yet. This is to give you, here's what we've got in our rules rewrite process. Do you have concerns? Does this bit look great? If you have specific concerns, I don't think we probably want to hash that out here, but if you can write them up or identify them. For example, I know Supervisor Kinnear has a change that he would like to make later. It's like 2.8 or something. Anyway, we'll get there. You mentioned it like 4 meetings back, and I made a note. So we're going to run through this relatively quickly. Jim has done absolute humans work, taking our rules, some rules that we were in the process of revising, the recommended WCA rules, and merging them into one document. There, of course, have been some hiccups along the way, but I think we're getting there, and I think we'll have a good product at the end. Does anyone have any clarifying questions before we plunge in? All right.
All right. Hi, everybody. Remember, don't kill the messenger, okay? I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. A couple meetings ago, those you were here, remember that I spoke about the purpose behind this was to modernize our rules and to make sure there weren't any problems with the statute that was put into our current rules of the board that has changed over time, and honestly to put it into a better order. Over the course of years, I can tell reading it myself, having not even been here, that there's been amendments to it and changes to it. And right now it's kind of a disorderly rules of the board. So that's probably the main mission of this. It's in 4 sections. This is just sections 1 and 2. 3 is a pretty short section. It's just about those people who are the board supervisor or excuse me, the chair of the board, the vice chair, and about the committee leads. And then section 4 is about it's regarding how to conduct meetings, basically. And then there's going to be some appendices. Appendices, there you go. Where I make note of the fact that part of the first part of our current rules of the board moved all the various committees into an appendix A. So you won't see that in this, and it's not that we've thrown it away. And I did work on this with many other people, getting their opinion. When I started this process, I had been with the county for 6 weeks, I believe. So I certainly didn't have a lot of opinions about how the board meetings should be run because I'd only been to 2 in my entire life. Anyway, section 1, really quickly, it's more of a preamble to the rules of the board. The only thing I changed on that was to add Dunn. Go to 2.01 county board meetings. Everything, by the way, that's just black and white, that's from the model rules. I didn't make up any of that stuff. You can see highlighted as number 4. I tried to highlight and make red whenever it was something from our current rules. That is from the current process, chapter 2.05.
And so often we will have pieces that are from the model rules where we didn't have an equivalent rule in ours. So one of the things we wanted to do as we were going through was very carefully say, okay, these are our current rules. Do we think this is working? Versus an alternative language for that piece. So that was one of the things that we were looking at as we were going through this.
Going on to the next page, I added county clerk as the pro tempore. Section B, the part that's in red is you're not allowed to have meetings on Veterans Day. That's why you have that kind of strange rule about the second Tuesday unless it's the 11th. And then letter C, that is from our current rules, 2.09, 1 and 4. Excuse me. Turning the page, it continues with the change from 2.09.
And throw a hand up if you have questions at any
Yeah, I will
point.
pause at any time you want to. I tend to ramble on pretty quickly if nobody stops me. So letter D, we took again more or another section of our current rules to regarding adding items to the agenda. And then I make a note of the fact that I list Appendix B. That's because Appendix A is now going to be the committees and subcommittees.
I was just gonna say, so I think if you just tend to this for a second, because this is new, this
Yep.
is in regard to how do you, if something doesn't come through a committee, how can you get something onto the board agenda? So make sure that if you got any questions about that, you
Yeah,
raise them.
we had a process that was not particularly well defined in our rules, and that led to a certain amount of stress over the past 8 to 10 months. And one of the things we were trying to do with this was make it a clear and easily understandable process. Supervisor Canary, do you have a question?
Let me read it just a second here. I did have a question about it. Can the executive committee with these rules still call a meeting?
So there are two kinds of special meetings. Actually, three, I guess. One, we as the executive committee would say, we're going to have a special meeting, but we need to get signatures. There's also in Wisconsin statute, there's a rule for special meetings. Any majority group of the board can cause a special meeting to happen by petition. Dan,
Yeah, that's why I came up. This is something that was new in that this did not exist in our existing rules. The only way a special committee, so the statutes give you, the board, the ability to set the schedule for your meetings. You're only required to have one a year. Our ordinance defined when our meetings were going to be. So if you wanted to have a meeting that wasn't defined in ordinance, then you had to follow that petition process. So what this specific statement does is it gives another way of doing that we hope to be a little bit easier. And a lot of this came up when we were planning on doing that December broadband at the meeting. It's like, why do we have to go through this whole petition? Can we just put it on the agenda of the county board and have the whole county board vote at the county board meeting to say, hey, we're going to hold an additional meeting? That's what that first sentence does, is says, if we put it on the agenda for the meeting, we can vote on it and hold a special meeting, as opposed to going through the petition process to do that.
so we still have all of the tools that we had available before, but this allows us one more way to do it.
Good explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Dan is being sort of our
Liaison.
our king of the rules nerds.
I would note that the county board meetings up until, I don't really know, maybe the 20s, maybe even the 30s, 1930s, did occur once a year, but they went for 2 to 3 days.
We have to kill each other.
And clearly we're held in a bar. Supervisor Steen.
Actually, much longer than through the 20s. I think that the budget meetings in the 60s and 70s, and maybe not the 80s, consisted of 2-day meetings in person in the fall, because I can remember. And I suppose part of the reason was that the majority of the county board members were farmers, and lend itself to that type of situation. But just a bit of history. I was on in 1920. Thank you.
Thank you for your perspective, Supervisor Steen. Okay. Okay, yeah, we can roll on again.
All right, going to 2.02, the county board meeting agenda. I added the county manager because the county manager position wasn't mentioned in the model rules.
And the county manager does it.
Yeah. And then number 2 there, it's adding another process whereby supervisors adding a process for supervisors to request items to be added to an agenda. That was lacking from our current rules, or at least it was at best murky.
Very murky.
And then the following.
I just that's a big one.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Supervisor Kinnear.
I really wanted time to think about it, but if Dan's going to explain it, that's even better.
I can explain it. So yes, the intent was there wasn't a great clear process for, so as you're aware, right, something would come from, anything that goes to the board has to go through a committee. So if a member of the board wanted to get something on there, what was the process in doing that? The statutes allowed for a process for a member to kind of go through that petition process to have a special meeting, which kind of gave you a path of doing that. But I think we felt like having a special meeting for any time somebody wanted to do that got a little out of control. So this area kind of allows for a petition. So it starts with an individual who wants an item added to the agenda. They would find another person to co-sponsor that. They would then bring that to the county clerk, who will send out a notice. And so that'll essentially be a petition where if a majority of the members of the board wanted to see that item on the agenda, it would then be added to the agenda. It may also be at the discretion of the chair sent to a committee at that point, at which point the data would, or that a report would have to come back to the full board within, I think it's
2 regular meetings?
two. I think that was 3 regular meetings.
Okay.
The 2 regular meetings had to do with when that petition is filed with the county clerk. We're not going to just let a petition live up there forever. So if you were to do that, you essentially, let's say you did it at an executive, like a today, right? You would have until the May county board meeting to get all of those signatures. If you didn't receive signatures of a majority of the board in that amount of time, that petition goes away and would have to be reinitiated.
Dan, could you please explain the sentence that reads, a petition signed by supervisors prior to the organization meeting will not be valid following the election? Is that
The organization
here,
meeting is the
or-
April meeting
right?
of the board. So
We have
that
it
would
here.
essentially be that if in March, you had a fully signed, after the March meeting, you had a fully signed petition, and then you wanted to bring that to April, which is made up of a different board,
You could do it.
that wouldn't count,
can't do
right?
it.
So
Okay.
one board can't force an agenda item for the next board, if that
Got
makes
it.
sense.
All
So
right.
the organizational meeting
You
is
said
the
it belonged-
April every other year meeting where the new supervisors come in.
Go ahead.
Okay, we can go back and forth here. So if I gave it to the clerk
Mhm.
and the clerk was gone to Europe again, is there a time frame that the clerk has to get it out to the people? Or
Staff.
or-
So
We-
the
we-
clerk alerts the board that the petition is in the clerk's office. And the clerk doesn't have to be there, but someone from the clerk staff always is. So you doesn't have to be, you don't have to sign it in the presence of the clerk.
But is there a time frame?
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, that's not written in there, the amount of time it would take the clerk from receipt in order to notify. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, he could take 2 weeks to do it and then that 14 days is kind of shot.
Right. I think that's something we'll make a note of. I think that makes sense
Yeah.
that the clock would start at the notification would be my
Yeah.
thought, but yeah, we'll
Good
get
catch.
that in there.
Yeah, the goal is a clearer and easier process to get things on the agenda.
And our intention was also that the petition, it could fall that the petition for that to go on the agenda could also be signed at the county board meeting.
That's why it went over 2 county board meetings. Yes. So.
Okay,
And on the following page, you have in letter D, I made a note of the fact that I removed this section regarding a paper copy being provided of agenda and meeting packet. Uh, 2.03 and 2.04, that first page, that's straight from the model rules. So there are no edits to that section or that page, I should say.
Can I add that in that, that's not to say this is word for word what our previous one did, but we believe that it does not cause any significant change to that or current practice.
Which I make note of later on. I said
Okay.
model rules and it's in compliance with our current process. And then the page 2, I did note the letter D in red. It's
That was the one you were concerned about, Supervisor Kinnear.
it's an edit from the model rules that that the vice chair, in the absence of the chair, has the full authority of the chair.
Did you want to comment on it? Supervisor Kinnear?
Thank you. Here I am again. Let me just read it again, make sure I know what.
This is,
This is something that we changed while I was on the board, maybe 2019. And we were concerned that we would have public coming into a committee meeting and a snowstorm or whatever, and we wouldn't have a quorum. And at the time I thought, well, gee, we have a pretty powerful position with the board chairman, and this makes it even more powerful, especially since they're the ones that appoint the chairs. But I thought, well, it seems reasonable, but since COVID, we can do things distance. We don't need to be there. So the purpose of this was to make sure that there's always going to be a quorum, and I think with the technology we have now, there always will be, or at least. And I think it gives even more power to the position of the board chair. We've been very, very fortunate to have excellent board chairs, and even though they've been different, I could say persuasions or viewpoints, it's worked out really well. But I hate to see one person come in and misuse it. They're already an official member of every committee and can vote, the county board chair. This just gives you even more power. And I would just ask you to think about it and just eliminating this completely. Thank you.
yeah, so Supervisor Steen. I was gonna say, we implemented, so the model rules has a version of this. We implemented this specifically, Dave Bartlett was still chair, and we were having a bunch of committee meetings where we were not meeting quorum. And so that was why this was created, but I think you have an excellent point that the electronic option allows us a better opportunity for this. I don't need anyone to like vote on this today, but put it in the back of your head. And if it's something you have strong feelings about one way or another, when we get to the end of this process, and come back and do another set of edits and then go through and do our actual approval, know if you want to keep this or if you want to drop it or what. Supervisor Steen.
And I also think the intent was somewhat that the wheels of county government grind pretty slowly, and if you don't have a quorum, you can't take any action. So if you only meet once a month, that could cause extra meetings to get your business done. Just something to think about. I'm not one way or another, and please educate me on this. Maybe I misunderstood it, but you're telling me that the county board, I know he's a member of every committee, but he can vote even if everybody's there?
Yes.
Only if there's not a quorum.
That's what I thought. I thought the county board certainly can go to every meeting, but he doesn't have a vote, the way I understood it, unless they need his vote to have a quorum. Is my right or wrong?
The PRD had 4 people at a meeting and I was gone, and the county board chair voted.
Well,
Yeah, because there wasn't a quorum.
Because there wasn't a quorum.
There were 4 people there, that's
Well,
a
that
quorum.
was a mistake. Yeah.
And he did vote, and it made quite a difference in what could have happened. But I thought, according to our current rules, that the county board chair is a member that could vote.
Ex officio member, I don't think voting in less quorum. Dan, can you?
because I'm sharing right now makes it hard for me to go do that research.
Okay,
But
so,
we can certainly bring that back, I think, and just make a note. I know we're gonna go in 3 and 4 next time, but we can give a clarification.
yeah, I know.
On that point.
If I may, this is one of the good reasons why we're doing this, because we have two differences of opinion on what actually can happen. And
Well, and I
I'm
know I
sure all
read
of
this
us would like to
today.
know what's correct, Thank you.
Yeah, I thought it was ex officio and could only vote in the case of lack of quorum. But it is entirely possible that I am wrong. It would not be the first time.
I would just note that in the 3-ish years that I've been in this role, I don't recall a meeting which we haven't had a quorum because of the ability to appear
Yeah.
remotely. So we had one where we got close and then somebody came at the last moment, but it's really clean. I do recall the days in which we had to cancel meetings because we didn't have quorums.
Yeah. And I know in the past it was an issue even with, well, I want to say the snowbirds.
Yeah.
That we had a number of them and, it's up to them whether they want to interrupt their vacation time or whatever to attend a meeting. And it was nice to be able to call on the board chair and say, I'm going to be short a person, could you come? And I know I did that a number of times. Thank you.
Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, just another thought I had here that occasionally we haven't had in the past items brought up that needed to be done in a hurry. And we've suspended the rules of the board so that we could move ahead without the first or second reading or the first reading. Perhaps some thought in this whole process so that we don't run into that, because some people are upset that we would alter the rules, suspend the rules to accomplish something, even though it's a good idea. But I guess I'm throwing more gasoline on the fire here. But
Okay, so the ex officio and the chair, vice chair as quorum is something that we will take a close look at and come back with more information. All right, moving on.
All right, on to 2.05. These are all from the model rules and they're in alignment with what we currently do now. Turning the page on 2.06, the same applies there. I did not change the model rules and the model rules match what Dunn County does currently. 2.07, I actually used our rules. I thought it was appropriate where our rules seem pretty good to just continue to follow it, except there are two noted edits. Letter B, the last sentence has been added, just to make it clear that these should be approvable expenses. And then on the last page, letter E, the last sentence was changed from claim submitted after the claim period deadline to the end of the fiscal year, which is January 31st, if you don't know that. So even if you had an event in late December, you don't have to have it in by January 1st, it would be January 31st.
And I would also point out if we were to change that particular section, that change cannot be done, cannot take effect until the organizational meeting. So you can't give yourself a raise. Well, if you win election, you can, but
You can't give yourself a raise right now.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to 2.08 and 09. The 2.08A actually combined the committees and the board to make it a combined rule. And I point out the fact that the model rule said that all minutes will be turned to the clerk immediately after the meeting. Change that so it could be after they're approved at the following meeting, basically, which is what our current practice is. And then in 2.09, remove vice chair, sorry. But remove vice chair, just to follow what we currently do. The vice chair isn't at the head. And then I added a little bit at the end for other special circumstances, because I understand that occasionally training meetings would happen. Excuse me. And I wouldn't want to be tied into, you need to be in the number, order for those occasions in case small group discussions were to be had or whatever. .10 is from the model rules. B, slight change there, change from are encouraged to indicate their interest in positions to also indicate their interest prior to the organizational meeting, just so we know what people want to do prior to the first meeting. And the next page, there are no changes there from the model rules. 2.11, there were one of three choices in the model rules, but one of them was chosen. It matches the process we currently follow. I added recognition to chapter 5 for the duties of the county manager, basically. And then there's a clarification, the bottom one, clarification on how an individual supervisor may ask for a report or get information from the county government.
And I will note, as I was reading these the fourth time today, under here, we have the county manager as chief executive officer of the county, which is not the model that we actually operate under. Technically, I'm the chief executive officer of the county. It's because we're an administrative coordinator, administrator hybrid rather than the next step up. So we'll get that adjusted so that it comports with the current. And I should have caught it like the first 3 times I read it. So no worries on you. It wasn't until this afternoon I'm like, wait, is Chris staging a coup? But also, even if we adopted this language, we couldn't be changed to an county executive without a referendum. So we're going to have to adjust it to just make sure the language comports with our current rules.
Just a quick question there before we go on. Nothing serious here, but so if I wanted some information from the facilities committee, I would talk to Ann. Is that correct? According to this, she'd be the one that I would contact. County board members desiring information or report from a department head or other county staff shall request such information or report either in the context of a county board or committee meeting or from the committee chair. So I asked Dan for some information directly.
So yeah, instead of, I see what your question is, I have to go through the committee rather than talk directly with staff? Is the implication?
Yeah, is that what it says? I'm not saying it's right or wrong or good or bad, but
That's what it
That's
okay.
what it says. I would, and I think maybe we can do some clarification because I think the intent would be that you can ask the county manager, you can ask me. What it's intended to not have is every county administrator, county supervisor talking to department heads on a consistent basis and to funnel that information. But I would argue that Chris and I are an exception.
Okay.
to
Yeah, well,
that.
I agree with it.
So-
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what it was saying.
Okay.
Moving on here. Let me get my notes in order. We're almost there, guys.
No, that's good.
2.12 vacancies of the county board. If you read the model rules, they have kind of a process laid out in them where the person kind of interviews and has to give a performance or give a speech or something. And I just more closely tried to follow what the current process is from what I've been told, if there's a vacancy. So that's where, and our current process is compliant with Wisconsin statutes.
Yeah, that's what we've done the last 2 times.
And the last page, 2.13 is taken from our rules and our current process. And 2.14, I actually basically cut and paste that from our current rules. We went back and forth a little bit on that, but our current rules seem to be working from what I've been told. And I didn't really like the model rules, and I had some agreement with people I was speaking with.
Yeah, one of the concerns we had with the model rules is it did not include any teeth essentially for someone who is in a closed session going out and talking about it. And I don't know why they didn't include that with the model rules, because the reason that I brought that forward like a year or 2 ago was conversations with WCA where they said the state has no process for having teeth in this ordinance. If you want your closed session to stay confidential, you need to have a mechanism for enforcing that because the state does not. And so I don't know why they removed that from their model rules during their discussion, but that's quite recent. All right.
That's what I have. If you have any other questions, I'm sure Dan can answer them.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot
Wow.
of work.
Nice.
Yeah, very well done. I just I just swoop in and go, I need to change that word there.
And, well, Kelly, Supervisor McCullough did mention it, that he read that 3 times before he identified that.
Yeah.
These are model rules that we have read, but yeah, the more eyes, the better, because we are taking language and there could be times where it inadvertently is changing something that we didn't want. So, yeah.
Well, and I'll note that I read it 3 times without catching it, and catching things like that is my day job.
And I will say too, if you carefully read the model rules, you might see that I took a comma out here or a if out there. I mean, I wanted to make the language flow properly, so.
For you. All right. That takes us to the end of this stage of the rules review. We'll do probably 3 and 4 next time, and then appendices a third time, or 3 and 4. The appendices are the main reason for structuring it that way is so that this, this is ordinance. We want the appendices to be a little bit easier to adjust for, like, things like committee composition. Anyone, Chris, you have anything you want to add to that? Dan? Nope. Okay. Then we will move on to the next item on the agenda. Determination of a process for county manager hire. And at this point, Jenna is gonna come up and run you through the 4 options. And we will have a brief conversation. We might end up going into closed session, but we'll see.
All right, thank you. So I did include a report in the packet. Looks like it's on page 25 if you want to scroll through. So as Chair McCullough mentioned, we had met as a small group to discuss the available options that the executive committee could consider in the selection process for county manager, which will be here before we are even ready for. And so I will just kind of briefly run through those, and I won't read the whole report for you, but I'd be happy to answer questions about each option as we go. The first option, which is probably what you typically hear, would be hiring a third-party search firm that would conduct the recruitment for the position. They have nationwide contacts, obviously would depend on what firm provides the service, but some are even seeking out candidates that aren't necessarily looking for employment, but might be a good fit in their mind. So it is a little bit more of a intentional recruitment process. So that is a value that would be added there. However, the cost, and this is probably on the low end, to be honest, at least 25,000 likely to hire a third party to conduct this search. And that really depends on probably some of the aspects of what we would want included in that service.
And if I might, part of the discussion when we were talking through this was several of us have had relatively recent experience or at one remove experience with the big executive hire process, and none of us has seen it being particularly more effective than, for example, the in-house process we had when we hired Chris. So we're not thrilled by the idea of a lot of expense for not a lot more.
Sure. So that segues nicely into the second option. So we are able to conduct a public search within our own HR team that would reach out to nationwide job boards. We would also tap into those organizations that are, like ICMA and things like that, to make sure that the word gets out there. I think it's obvious in saying this is likely the more cost effective tool. It would take time from our staff, but we have folks on our team that are hired to do recruiting, so that would not be a concern for us. Disadvantages could be that, again, it takes our team time, but we're ready for that. So the recommendation for us, from us, is that some level of a public search be conducted. We've discussed, for transparency purposes and ensuring that the public is aware that this is an opportunity, and that it's clear that each applicant is evaluated fairly based on what the executive committee decides the position needs. The third option would be to have us only post internally. So that would be existing Dunn County employees being able to apply for the opportunity. This provides county employees with an opportunity, right? We want to be considerate of promotional opportunities and development as much as we can for employees. However, with that being said, it could delay the process if there isn't a suitable internal candidate, or it could also raise some questions from the public if there wasn't a full external search process. That's not to say that we don't have interested in wonderful internal candidates, but it is something to consider as far as having a fair and impartial and transparent process. And lastly, our county ordinance, our personnel code, does allow for, and I guess the board could vote to do whatever they wanted, but it is in the ordinance to allow for a promotion that could take place without any sort of recruitment. So that could look like, okay, we have a interested internal candidate and we don't want to bother with a recruitment. And so the executive committee could opt to go that route as well. There are some disadvantages to that approach, and that others internally may feel that they didn't have the opportunity, could impact morale. And it could just leave out folks that might have been interested and have the experience that we just don't know about. And then again, that lack of transparency with the public is a concern. So again, the recommendation from both myself and HR, but we had discussed as a smaller group, is to do the public search. Due to the cost of hiring a third party, I recommend that we conduct the search in-house. And we feel that this would allow for a fair and competitive evaluation of all of the candidates that apply. Are there any questions before I move on to what that would look like as far as timeline and process?
Anybody? Not yet, apparently. Oh, sorry, Supervisor Steen.
This is what we did last time, correct?
It is. Okay. So if we were to go this route with our human services HR team conducting the recruitment externally, I know that can sound confusing, but our team would conduct it. The posting would go out to the masses, right? We would actually look at getting this posting up and running as soon as possible. Have it open for at least a month, and then take mid-April to the beginning of May to review and select the candidates that we would like to interview. As part of this, I would propose that we continue working with a subcommittee, which would consist of Chair McCullough, Vice Chair Steen, and Supervisor Headland as the chair of the admin committee, and myself as well. That allows for a little bit more flexibility in scheduling and things like that to keep the process moving. We would look at doing, and this we don't have to stick to these dates, but I did put on May 14th for the first round of interviews. This is already an executive committee meeting, so my hope would be to maybe just expand it to not take another day out of your schedules. And then as a result of that, the executive committee would decide if a second round would be necessary. So depending on that, then we would look at running background checks on the final selected candidate, running references, and then hopefully issuing a contingent offer, having the executive committee vote to pass along the resolution to appoint in June, and then the full county board would vote at the June meeting. And if this is an external candidate that is the successful candidate, that time frame would allow for them to give them some version of a notice to their current employer, with a hope that they could start mid-July to allow for a little bit of overlap with Chris before she retires. And I believe August 8th is likely the date. So that is
Supervisor Headland.
an option.
Yeah, just one question. I guess I'm gonna give it to Chris. Is there anything in terms of the job description for your position that you would change before we send out our requests?
Actually, I did look at it recently because another county had asked for it, and I think it's pretty solid. I don't know that it needs any significant change.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. In addition to kind of the timeline, again, looking for the committee to put a stamp of approval on me being able to work with a subcommittee to keep things moving along, helping me to finalize the interview questions, things like that. Any sample assignments that we would like to give. All members of the executive committee would serve on the interview panel. So which Jim has very recent experience with this. And that would be intended for me to be asking the questions. You know, we'll have a set of questions, a standard set that we hope to stick to as much as possible just to remain compliant with equal opportunity. But the executive committee would be able to ask clarifying questions about answers that the candidate provides, or if they have a question about their resume or application. And again, if necessary, a second round of interviews will be determined based on the outcome of the first round. So as part of this, I did, with the help of Chris and Dan, and sourcing some of our information banks that we have available to us through different memberships, and did kind of a review of comparable wages for this type of role. Of course, we have an administrative coordinator form of government. However, with the county manager ordinance, there is some added responsibilities there. So it's not completely apples to apples as far as comparing to counties that have a county administrator or a county executive. I will say that in doing that review, the counties that we have access to that information for, Dunn County, as we sit now, is on the lower end. But with that being said, I think that we could start with posting the position at 130,000 to 171,000, knowing that we can negotiate that with executive committee, depending on experience and education. This is also consistent with the highest pay grade on our wage grid, which, like, we don't have any positions listed in that. That is the range that we went with the last time we posted for this position.
Right, anyone have questions for Jenna? be questions for those of us who had the short subcommittee meetings. C, any strong feelings or objections to the recommended course, or wants to entertain any of the other available courses? The floor is open. Supervisor Bauer.
Yeah, I would recommend going with the human resources, doing the interviews. I mean, setting it all up and doing it internally and externally. So anybody inside can get the opportunity to do it. Plus you might get an outside up, kind of like we did the first one, I guess. Yeah.
Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, I would just like to mention that, for clarification, that the executive board would be able to ask whatever questions they wanted, except that they would be filtered through Jenna. Am I correct in that?
Are you
mean, they-
intending that to mean during the interviews?
Well, prior to that, the executive board would have an opportunity to ask some questions or put some questions out there that they'd like included.
Sure, we can add that
Believe that's how we
Step
did it last time.
to the
so,
process of
yeah.
finalizing the interview questions.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Supervisor Quinn?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, Supervisor
Okay.
Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recommend going with the staff recommendation as well. I've worked with Jenna in hiring Paula. We hired Jim, we hired Chris. She does a really excellent job, and I think that's the appropriate way for us to proceed.
Thank you, Supervisor Morehouse. Supervisor Quinn.
I was just gonna make that same point in the form of a motion. The motion would be that we accept the recommendation of the HR department for the selection process for county manager position.
Supervisor Steen.
I would second that.
I'm just framing that. Technically, in the action items.
Oh,
It is I did think about where to put it, and it's, because it's not going anywhere from here.
Yeah.
So it's agendaed as determination of a process. So I think that's sufficient to allow the public to know that you would be making a decision about that.
Yeah, that was purely a me pausing and saying, yes, we can do it that way.
we can do by acclamation too. I don't care, but.
No, I think
So-
that's reasonable. So the motion on the floor is to go with the recommendation. Are you including the timeline in that?
The recommendation includes all of that. Yeah.
Great. As presented by HR. So just stating it so that you've all got it. Now, is there any debate?
I'm watching your face.
I think Jim had the same response I did. That was I think we can do it that way. Supervisor Wilsey, do you go ahead and push the button and jump in?
Maybe this is just elephant in the room, but it seems like we have number 2 that's very capable. Could we just promote, or would we not want to do that? And then we wouldn't have to go through all the process and we just end up hiring somebody that we already know we like.
That
Just
is-
asking.
That is certainly an available possibility. It has some cost savings pluses going for it. We did discuss it, and this is just me summarizing our smaller meeting, felt that so a lot of what we do is about doing things in a clear, responsible manner, dotting all the i's and crossing all the t's. And we felt that having a more open search process was probably more appropriate. But that would certainly be a possibility, but it's not under currently we're debating the motion on the floor. So it would be inappropriate to have that debate unless the motion fails.
Although isn't that a argument for against the motion? Isn't that an appropriate point of discussion? If it's-
Sure.
So that's what you're doing, right? You're saying,
I don't know if I am, but
okay, well,
That was just a question I had.
No, that's a completely reasonable question. Is any other speaking? All right. So the motion is to follow the recommendations. You have them in front of you. Stating that one more time. Is there any further debate? All right, then we are ready to move to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll do it that way. You need anything else from us before?
Just a reminder that the four of us will meet on Monday
Monday
to
to
take care of business.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Poor Gary, he had no idea.
All right, all right. Don't make me come over there. Item 7, reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the executive committee, carry forwards, budget adjustments. You have this in the packet. Are there any clarifying questions? Supervisor Bauer.
I just got a question on the buses and stuff from transit. They're already 3-4 years old already, right? I mean, we ordered them in 22, isn't that right? I mean, are we ever gonna get them, or do we just automatically go, how old these old buses gonna last till we get our new ones? So can you, I'm just saying, that if you're moving money forward, do you have to do that, or can you just spend it on something else? I'm just asking questions, all, you know.
Is this in reference to the electric buses?
Yeah.
That money is allocated specifically attached to a grant. So if we tried to allocate it to something else, the grant would vaporize.
I'm saying, when it's the electric buses, maybe just go to
Well, but
fossil fuel or something.
that,
They just get the new buses in here, you know.
well, we got Supervisor Brockman.
We have gotten some more buses. I
Yeah.
mean, we are replacing the ones that are old.
Oh,
We
Yeah.
did buy a couple of used ones that are bigger. They fit our system a lot better. We are updating, knowing that these electric buses have been put off for a long
I'm
time.
just saying you're hanging on
Yeah.
to those ones. I just thought maybe.
No, we're not hanging on to old ones. We are updating. Just,
Yeah.
this is that grant that we can't do anything else with, so.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so we're going through the normal cycle, but okay. Thank you for giving a better grasp of the question than I had. Supervisor Steen.
Yes, do we have a reasonable expectation when we may expend that grant? And I have some worries regarding what's happening in Washington. Is that grant is that in cement or where does that stand?
I think that the answer to that is beyond the scope of what we on the committee can really, I would love to have that conversation with you, but I don't think this is the appropriate venue because we don't have those answers.
Well, let me rephrase my question then. Is there a time frame when we have to spend that grant?
They keep postponing it, so at this time, no. I will tell you, we didn't talk about the electric buses today, but it's on the agenda for next month. So I will have an update for you next month.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just when they give us the money. Anyone else? All right, then I would need a motion and a second for the carry forwards and budget adjustments. Supervisor Morehouse moves, Supervisor Steen seconds. Any debate? All right, you've got the motion. One more call for debate. Hearing none, we are ready to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Review of reports, resolutions, and ordinances coming to the county board from the standing committees. Legislative committee resolution on court funding. You were all here. We did that. It goes on to the county board. We don't need to do anything about it. further facilities, I. And is there anything you want to share with us about how this came through?
So the first one is the transfer station, and we had one bid, and it was a good bid. It was about what we expected. So we are asking this to move forward and to the rest of the board to approve.
All right.
Is there any questions on that one?
Nope, and it goes straight from you to the board, so.
Okay, and then the second one is the purchase agreement with Workhorse Development. So they brought a proposal with maps about doing about 75 plus senior apartments, 55 plus, and then retail underneath with a daycare and perhaps another coffee shop on that property. And so, and again, the price was above what we expected, and it seems to be what, could be very useful to the county.
Anyone have any questions for Ann on that? Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you. And it says the proposed use of the property will align with the concept drawing and provide retail space, et cetera. Or maybe Jim could answer this too, but how set in stone is that? Could they say, oh, we just did a study and it's not going to work. We're going to do something different.
I would anticipate that we would include in the final contract clauses that would not allow them a lot of wiggle room, but Jim can certainly answer the details of that much better than I could.
Well,
Or Dan.
between zoning control over it, so they can't just build whatever they want to build. And we're putting together a sales agreement, which isn't finalized, but we're requiring language where they will proactively state their intended purposes. I have said from the beginning here that we all remember 2008 and when the housing market crashed, there are a lot of companies that had intentions that didn't go through. So you can't completely control once you sell the land, but we're having them put in writing multiple times their intended use and what they want to use it for. And then we have the history of this company as well. Dan?
Yeah, that's the basics of it. I think the short answer to you, it is not a guarantee. It is not locked in stone. A lot of it is about trust in the people that you're selling that to. The other component of that is it will be followed up with a development agreement with the city. So the city will have also a little bit of, probably even a little bit more control, and they have been a part of all of our negotiations and discussions with the developer. But yeah, it is. The short answer is it is not set in stone, but we believe highly likely.
And you referred to, the history. So different developers work a little differently. Some of them might take a long time and keep putting things off. Some of them are really good at it. What's the history of this one as you've seen them?
Yeah, so they've done a good job. They can get things done quickly. I think their plan is to move quickly on that, but they're not going to build a building until they have somebody to move into it. So there is that component of that. They are developers, so they will kind of go through that. So as we talk about this, and they have people that they've worked with, we've put them in touch with people as it relates to childcare facilities, and they have other channels in which they're reaching out to. I believe they haven't said it for sure, but I believe they have somebody who will do the residential component of that space already lined up. But the nature of their business is they are not going to build the building until they have a renter.
It's kind of interesting to me because I thought about this in the county board. There are a lot of 55 plus people on the county board and 75 plus people on the county board. So I'm thinking, I want this to go through and do a good job.
Highly
But
competitive, right?
I also want a garage. I don't want to walk outside in the ice and clean my car off. So I'm hoping they're, did they
I asked
about
that question about the garages, and there wasn't enough space on this piece
Okay.
of property.
All right.
Okay, that's good.
Chris?
I would just add, I think that we have been impressed with the communication, the speed, the openness of the developer. You know, sometimes developments can be kind of clandestine, and they've not been that at all. They've been very open. They've been willing to share the information. They've welcomed, including the city, as Dan indicated. I mean, they would be seeking some TID funding with the city, and so that would result in a development agreement. So there's, you know, there's a lot of different pieces. They probably have to do some zoning things with regard to the property. So, but I think we've been impressed by how easy that they've been to work with.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. Oh, Supervisor Headland.
Quick reference. If they want a garage, they could build it. The new facility was built in Eau Claire. Come take a look at that.
All right. Item C, administration resolution seeking designation of Dunn County as a family-friendly. And I know that there is more to this sentence, but it is not on my sheet. Yeah, workplace. So Vaughn.
Okay. Yeah, family friendly is a group that is formed, and they are go out and they're seeking membership. They're promoting family friendly employers in the area, and there's a lot of family friendly employers in the area already who have joined in with this group. They basically they have an agenda, so to speak, and we would, have to follow that agenda, and then they would deem us family friendly, and we would be able to take an incentive advantage of their promotion and their advertising and that designation. For instance, previously Jackson County, Burnett, Polk, the city of Altoona, the city of River Falls, the city of New Richmond, along with some of the educational institutions in Stout, Eau Claire, River Falls, and Chippewa Lake Tech have all joined in. So we thought it was a very worthwhile venture. The cost is $500. And Jen, is that per year? Or is that's yeah, the second annual dues of $500. We voted on this in committee and voted unanimously to bring it forward. Thought it was a worthwhile venture. And I think, we've done a lot in the last few years here to promote that, and family friendly is how you keep people around. So.
Thank you. All right. Reports from standing committees. Let's start over here. Give Supervisor Wilsey a little break and not throw him into the deep end right off the go. Supervisor Vogel.
The Facilities Committee met on February 26th at 5 p.m. in this room. And you heard about a couple of the things we discussed for those two sales. We had a fair and fair board report, and they don't have the theme yet, but they have food vendors and judges hired, and so they're ready for July 23rd through the 27th. So mark your calendars for the Dunn County Fair. The Sunrise Rotary gave a grant of $1,800 for Caddy Woodlawn's roof to replace it. So that's on the schedule. And then we had a representative from Verigy, who is the energy management company. That, I guess, would be what you'd call them. And so they've been meeting with the Facilities Committee and I believe Dan, looking at, potential sites for the solar panels, looking at the HVAC in the Judicial Center. They're going to do a thorough review of our current energy expenses and come back with a package to review about drawing, scope, work plan, timeline, savings. And so hopefully in April, we'll have a scope verification meeting, and then it'll come back to the facilities committee, and then hopefully the full board will see it May 21st. All goes well. So that, and our next meeting is March 26th at 5 p.m.
Thank you Supervisor Vogel. Supervisor Brocknow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Highway and Transit met this morning. Nothing really new on transit. Like I say, we'll get that update on the electric vehicles next month. Promise you. As far as highway goes, doing some snow plowing, doing still a lot of brush cutting. Shop is working on fabricating the second plow truck now. Hopefully that'll get done here in the next month or so. Engineering projects, we got the reimbursement for the Highway B I-94 to Packer Drive. That came back now, that $1 million that was covered by the state. That's completed. We are working on County Road D from 520th to County Road K project is scheduled for this summer. There'll be a detour on that. That's Irvington Hill. So, I mean, there will be a detour on that road, just so you guys are, looks like it probably starts sometime in May-ish or something like that. So, seasonal weight restrictions are on right now. Been a lot of talk about that. They usually last 6 to 8 weeks, trying to see if we should have any exemptions or not for certain vehicles. Highway construction, we found out that the creek or the bridge in County Road V up in Sheridan was supposed to be 100%. It looks like it's coming in over budget, so we're gonna have to do like an 80-20 on that instead. So that's gonna cost us some money. We also approved the Potter Cemetery historical sign. They want to have a historical sign out there next to the Welcome to Menominee sign. So we approved that. They're going to be putting a sign up there. Probably it won't be until next year, but it's their money. It's they're doing the money. So otherwise talked about mowing and spraying operations for the ditches. There's a lot of controversy on the spraying. Mowing is a lot more expensive than spraying. We are going to try doing half the county with spray this year and half the county's mowing. Keep track of all our expenses this year and see how it goes, and then switch it around to the next year for the other side. So that was about it. And we also came out with our 5-year improvement plan, or the newest one anyway. If you want to look at that, you can. Looks like our budget's going to be close to that $7 million a year if we're going to be able to do 15 to 20 miles a year. That's what it looks like at this time. So, anything else? I'll let you know later. That's it.
Thank you Supervisor Brocknow. Supervisor Bauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We met on February 18th. We met here in room 54. Kristen at UW Extension is working on her annual report. She also talked about federal funding, which could be a problem this year. Garrett shared his EMS in Dunn County. He had a long talk about that. That was an interesting conversation he had with their slowly can get people and stuff like that. Economic development, Adam Akoa is working with Wheeler in economic development and scheduling. A business expanse meeting with business owners in that area. So he's getting out of the county and doing a little bit more out in little smaller towns. Social media is picking up some of our notes and stuff being put out in the media. Broadband equity access and development grants are already done now. The applications are done, so everything should be in. The website for Explore Menominee is up and running. They're taking total control of that now, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. I spent a lot of time on Colfax Library. Andrew gave a good presentation as he did today, so that was very good. Got everybody got in on that. We did approve the $5,000 and send it on to the community on admin, which you already know that they approved that as well. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you Supervisor Bauer. Supervisor Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Health and Human Services Board last met on February 27th. We're starting to do this as part of our sort of ongoing learning, since human services is fairly complicated operation. But we had a really nice presentation from Carrie Nearing and Lori Radcliffe, 25 years and 21 years in DHS respectively, about a youth leadership program that they are doing in partnership with the Department of Children and Families, working with young adults who are either in delinquency or have experienced delinquency, in providing recommendations and observations to the state about improvements, and apparently some changes in the way social workers are trained, and about the absolute failure of secure detention have been taken into consideration. We had a very long report and lots of discussion from Veteran Service Officer Greg Quinn, who is not particularly worried at this point about the cuts to the VA. We had lots of questions and conversation, and some reports from Dr. Hall about cutbacks in medical personnel at the VA Center in Minneapolis. Since that time, significant cutbacks have been announced in the Federal Veterans Administration. So we are going to be on that. And also, since changes at the federal level are going to directly affect all three of the departments that we oversee, this is going to be on our agenda and our radar regularly. KT provided a great written report, and at my request, we spent a good bit of time talking about communicable diseases. Like measles. At the time of our report, had been 133 cases of measles in Texas. About 4 of those cases were in vaccinated individuals. And we looked at some data about, first of all, measles is incredibly easy to get. And we looked at some statewide data. Herd immunity, which is required so that nobody gets measles, is at 95% of vaccination rates. Dunn County has a 77% vaccination rate. There are also data available on school districts. And the school district of the Menominee area has an 89% vaccination rate. Boyceville was at 95, so that's quite interesting. But the upshot of that is that we don't have immunity to prevent measles outbreak in Dunn County. We also had a brief discussion, and not all of you know about this, about the state government oversight, accountability, and transparency committee's request for volumes of information. And we're working on that. Again, Paula provided a great written report and oral report as well. We're looking at cuts, potential cuts in the social services block grant, in Medicaid and in SNAP, which not only provides food stamps to families, but feeds our seniors and provides lots of services. So again, we're focusing on that, and it could have some significant impacts on Dunn County. We reviewed the vouchers and approved the carry forwards and budget adjustments, which we've dealt with today. And we meet again on March 27th. It was a long meeting.
Thank you, Supervisor
sorry.
Morehouse. Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you, Chair McCullough. This report for the neighbors of Dunn County Nursing Home. Carmen and staff have been keeping things going very smoothly. Carmen was just down to Madison to talk to our legislators and put forward things we need to have. She's working with Leading Age, and it's the Wisconsin Association of County Homes, and I think you're on that board? Okay.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Okay. So you couldn't hear that probably if you're the public here, but Carmen is off of one board, but she's still on the other one. And but she's done an excellent job keeping our needs in front of the people that can make decisions. And we had 4 new members on the Neighbors of Dunn County committee. So they're starting to really get up to speed and they're doing a good job. Carmen took one of them and myself on a very nice tour, and he was impressed. Hadn't been there before. And there's always something in the works. There's the practice evacuation coming up in the spring. Of course, as she told us, they don't evacuate everybody, but it's just an example of how many things they need to do with the rules they have for the state and federal government. It's amazing they can keep track of it. And they do a good job of it. Our next meeting is the 4th Thursday of the month at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Kinnear. Supervisor Quinn.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Planning, Resource and Development Committee canceled our meeting, our in-person meeting on the 5th. So the last meeting we had prior to that was back on February 19th. And we did normal staff reports, approved a final plat for a 6-lot, I think, sort of subdivision up in the town of Sand Creek, and did regular business. Much of our time in meetings has been taken up with preparation for the comprehensive planning process. We did have Tammy Traxler, our new zoning administrator, and Susan Budke from Regional Planning come to our one of our recent meetings and spent almost 2 hours with the committee going over the various elements of the plan and the planning process. Basically, the plan is to complete the process in 16 to 18 months, which will kind of get us into, well, a little past this time like next year. So we reviewed the timeline and reviewed the elements. Basically, the first elements are surveys. So there's a general survey that's going to include all citizens that are interested. There'll be an agricultural survey, which will also feed into the inclusion of the farmland preservation plan, which is part of the comprehensive planning process. And then there's a survey that's going to be more focused on towns. The survey, the general survey, we circulated questions that staff had put together to the board or the committee, and the committee sent in suggestions and solutions for corrections and additions. Ms. Traxler and Susan Bodke went over that. And the final survey is actually, I think, been posted online yesterday, I believe, right? No. So, and there'll be a follow-up sort of with communications regarding that fact that it's available and that it's important that people fill it out, along with some press releases and other kinds of publication materials. So that will be the first step. The next step will be the ag and the towns and the planning of the community meetings, of which there'll be at least 2, and the 4 to 5 focus groups plus other interviews. So what the Planning and Resource Committee has allocated every second month, we will allocate whatever time needed in our board meeting. Maybe 2 hours, it may be an hour, I don't know, to sort of review the status of the planning process and get reports from staff about how things are going and review whatever changes or modifications need to be made. So that's, I think we meet again next week and we'll continue the process doing that. Thank you.
Supervisor Quinn. Supervisor Headland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our group met, Committee on Administration here on Thursday, the 27th at 3:00. Conducted our normal set of business by reviewing staff reports, approving some vouchers. We had a nice influx I would say a question avoidance from Chris, because she ahead of time, look through those vouchers, and we often get vouchers that are labeled to the point we don't understand really who we're paying because of the name or, you know, why, maybe it's an individual. But in any case, we did approve the vouchers. We, of course, took care of a request for some money for the Colfax Library. Along with that, the carry forwards, and then the resolution seeking the family-friendly workplace. And again, that information's online, and there's a lot of nice, I think, positives that's going to do for us as we move forward with that program. Beyond that, we will be meeting coming up here March 27th, 3:00. And Diane, you can come early and join if you like. So,
Okay.
all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Headland. Supervisor Wilsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our last meeting was Monday, February 24th in room 60, this room. Our first major announcement was John Calabrese was resigning and stepping down, and that's why I'm here now, replacing him as chair of the Judicial Committee. Reports, we had District Attorney was not there. She did have in her written report that she did hire a new assistant district attorney, so that is good. Child support, Josie, nothing new to report there. Emergency management, Melissa, nothing new to report. Medical staff, Marcy, excuse me. Nothing new to report there. Sheriff was gone. Courts, Katie presented that the letter to send to the governor for more money. And CJCC was not at the meeting. So you would have thought it was a short meeting, but it was our longest meeting of the year. We had two presentations, one on the judicial with the new geothermal. And then the long meeting was, we had a presentation from Tony Christofferson, who is representing Elk Mound, and Dunn County, the Towns Associated voted to pursue looking into countywide EMS funding. So they have, I think he applied for a grant and was accepted. And so now they'll be doing a study, and I'm assuming this will come back to us sometime in July, and they want the county to take over. They're pushing the county to take over EMS and fire. So that was our meeting, and our next meeting is March 24th.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilsey. Our next meeting will be April 9th. I don't have anything else, so we are adjourned. Oh, so sorry, Supervisor Steen, I apologize.
Yes, on behalf of the Colfax Library, I'd like to thank the CRNT and the Committee on Administration. I did not interject myself in that. I let the committees rise or fall, approve or disapprove on the merits of the argument. And I thought our library director did a great job. And also the WCA board will be meeting Friday over in Green Bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Steen. I'm sorry I missed you there. All right, we are adjourned.